Welcome to Retail's Most Wanted, the show that examines the latest issues related to organized retail crime and how retailers and policymakers are fighting back against today's organized crime syndicates. I'm your host, Marty Carpenter, and today I'll be joined by Matt Kelley, the Senior Vice President of Business and Market Development at LVT. That's a company at the forefront of using smart surveillance and real-time data to help retailers and law enforcement work together more effectively. Always good to have LVT as a sponsor, and it's always good to have LVT send to someone as a guest. Now, Matt brings a front row perspective on how partnerships between solution providers, police, and retailers are reshaping prevention and response in the organized retail crime space. That conversation coming up right after this word from our sponsor. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with LVT, securing physical environments through intelligent automation. Learn more at lvt.com. That's lvt.com. Our guest is Matt Kelley, Senior Vice President of Business and Market Development at LVT. Matt, thanks for taking some time with us.
I appreciate it, Marty. I appreciate the opportunity.
So I know that you and I were both at the UTORCA conference recently. I just want to start with this. What does it mean to have such a large gathering of law enforcement leaders together in one place, focusing on combating organized retail crime? And what does that tell us about how far we've come, say, in the last 5 years?
I think that that's very important if we talk about collaboration efforts across public and private sector to really hear from the communities that we serve, to be able to make sure that we're meeting those needs on an ongoing basis.
And let's talk a little bit more about collaboration. Like, what does collaboration look like? Obviously, it's nice when they get together and talk about it and have, some speakers and such, but tell me how that helps them in their overall ability to collaborate once they leave an event like UTORCA and move on to actually going back to combating organized retail crime?
Well, I think really the hope is when they come together in those types of settings is to take best practices, what's worked and what's not worked, all the way to who are they partnering with across the public and private sector to ensure that the efforts they're putting forth within their communities are going to be the most effective.
So in your experience, what do you see as the biggest obstacles that prevent retailers and law enforcement from working together more effectively? And how can technology help remove some of those roadblocks?
I think some of the roadblocks really come down to a misalignment of objectives and expectations. And that's why communication is so important across those public and private partnerships, to make sure that everybody is aligned to what the overall objectives are that they're trying to achieve through whatever efforts they're undertaking, but then also making sure that both sides understand what role each one has to play in those efforts.
So tell me about the role that LVT plays in this, and specifically when it comes to real-time data sharing. How does that play into building stronger partnerships when it comes to dealing with organized retail crime?
I think LVT really is uniquely positioned because they are kind of the eyes and ears out in areas where you don't have traditional infrastructure that gives you the ability to get real-time information. And it comes down to coordination in those settings. If, say, for example, they're doing a retail blitz, that real-time information is critical to ensure that the people that they're going to engage with on site are the right people, and you've got resources staged in the right area so that they can react in an appropriate manner, in a timely manner as well.
When we talk about organized retail crime, I think it's so natural for us to focus on the really big retailers. But how can smaller or even regional retailers who may not have the same resources as a big national chain, how can they still be part of the collaborative efforts to combat organized retail crime?
Well, I think that's really where it's important for them to be a part of the community, whether it's Chamber of Commerce, whether it's going to local events, to voice what is impacting them. Because big retailers have huge teams that go towards those efforts, to doing the outreach, to sharing the win stories, to sharing what is being most challenging for them in the environments that they operate in, where the smaller players, maybe a mom and pop shop or a regional retailer, doesn't necessarily have that voice, or doesn't even have that function to be able to go, or the resources to go do that. That's why they need to be plugged into the communities. Being community leaders, being a part of those conversations is really important.
Is that kind of a challenge both for law enforcement or anyone sort of in the security space to reach out to those smaller retail organizations and say, come be part of this? I mean, it sort of seems easy. You can go pick up a big fish if you get Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, whatever. But if you got to go find mom and pop shops, they're a little more scattered and a little more difficult to collect a critical mass there. Has that been a challenge?
It has been a challenge, but I think that's really where law enforcement can use the data they have available to them, whether it's calls for service, whether it's any type of information they have, go and review that data, use that data to tell them where they're missing in terms of their strategy to be able to combat these crimes. They should be looking at that data and saying, well, we haven't noticed any communication with these pockets within the community. How do we go and drive that?
What do you wish more retailers understood about how to leverage their tech investments in partnership with law enforcement?
Well, that goes back to the collaboration conversation that we were just having, is making sure that they have a way to, one, communicate, two, to set those expectations, and to make sure that they can share that information, whether it's in real time to be able to coordinate efforts, or it's more of a reactionary to show size of problem. That's where it's really important to be able to do those things to get the right resources focused in the right areas.
I mentioned earlier that we had both been at the UTORCA, the Utah Organized Retail Crime Alliance event, sort of a summit that they had recently. As you were there and listening to sort of the conversation, either conversation amongst people who were just attending or those who were the speakers, what was like the biggest message that you took out of that, and what made you, I guess, most hopeful that we're heading in the right direction?
Well, I think a lot of the two biggest themes were collaboration and use of technology, right? And that's what we've been talking about. So that gives me hope that we are headed in the right direction. But as technology continues to evolve, ensuring that everybody understands what the technology is, why it's being used, and what the benefit is for both sides.
So if you were to look ahead a few years, how do you envision partnerships evolving between retailers, police, and solution providers like LVT?
Well, I think it's the common thread is being able to stitch the data across those public-private sectors all the way through to local law enforcement. So you think about solution providers being able to push that information to the retailers, then being able to push that to the local law enforcement and the communities that they serve, is being able to stitch that together in a seamless way. And I think that's where technology is going, especially here at LVT. We're thinking a lot about how we stitch that information together to be able to show that collaborative efforts and how the impact, not only from reactionary information, but also being able to get to the desired outcome much quicker and in a more efficient manner.
You are based in Utah, so we're pretty familiar with the UTORCA, the Utah Organized Retail Crime Alliance. But there are a number of those similar associations or alliances around the country. I wonder if you could just give me some insight on like what you see Utah doing right and what they could still learn from some of the other states you've been involved with.
Well, I think it really, because UTORCA was one of the very first. And so they kind of set the table for the rest of the ORCA organizations across the U.S. to say, this is what good looks like, and this is why it's so important. Whether people realize it or not, Utah kind of sits at the center of a lot of different roads from either the West Coast or down or up from the border to the rest of the U.S. Going eastward. So it's kind of an artery across the U.S. I think the collaboration is something that's been really impactful. I don't think that there's anything that UTORCA could do better, but maybe collaborating across multiple different ORCAs, I think, is something that I continue to push on and show the importance of talking across multiple different ORCAs. And I think that's where Western States ORCA does a really good job of bringing all those ORCAs together to be more collaborative in those efforts.
Matt Kelley of LVT, thanks so much for your insight and sharing it with our audience today.
Thanks, Marty. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's it for this episode of Retail's Most Wanted. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, LVT. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button so you can catch each new episode. We drop a new one every 2 weeks. We're also on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can find links for all of those in the show notes below. Thanks for being with us, everyone. And as always, keep up the good fight.